So today we're going to be continuing on with the 12 trials of Hercules and getting into kind of the metaphysics of that and what that all kind of means, or at least some useful principles that isn't just BS mythology that everybody talks about and everybody says, oh, that's cool what this symbol's supposed to represent, but doesn't mean anything in the long term. So let's get into that. So the next trial was birds. So after he cleaned out, pretty sure it was King. No, it was a different king, but he went to a king and washed out all the stuff, right? That was the end of the last video. And then the next one was birds. Okay, so there was these birds that were terrorizing a coastline that were wreaking havoc everywhere. And there was hundreds of thousands, and they were all sitting in trees, and it was impossible to actually, shoot them with arrows. So what Hercules did, is that he got a bell and rang the bell at the suggestion of Athena. And it's funny how Athena always shows up in all these different aspects of the myth, because Athena's the god of wisdom, right? So what does the bell represent? Well, if you have an idea, right, it rings a bell or something like that, right? We could associate that with truth. And so all these quote-unquote birds might represent the flightiness of ideas. So if we ring the truth, boom, all these birds that are preying upon the people of the coastline, or wherever, people, or ourselves, since they're our thoughts or whatever, we can shoot them down with the arrows that we have accumulated from basically conquering fear, right? And the arrow also represents truth as well, because that's what Apollo has. He was able to destroy the Leviathan with one shot, or he fought it for a long time and then had a bow from his father. The idea of the mind, right? He's the absolute principle of the mind. That's kind of what Zeus represents. Or you could say just totality in general, just the idea of of everything. If you thought of an absolute principle or all principle, that's what Zeus would represent. Yeah, and so basically he was able to take that bow of truth, ring a bell of truth. All these birds were scared because they were probably represented falsehood, or just degrees of truth that aren't really helpful, or that are actually detrimental to to our progress in terms of searching for truth. And then he shot them all down. Pretty easy. So then the next one, what is it? What is it? The next one, there was like this girdle of one of the Amazons, one of the queens of Amazon. And so, the Amazons were like these super BA warrior chicks that would just beat up everybody. That would just, basically is just chick warrior kingdom, right? That kind of stuff. And so the daughter, so basically his next quest was to get that girdle or whatever that was a gift from the gods, or a reward for something, of her valor, strength, all the things that you would associate with BA chicks, right? And so he had to go out, and then he found the queen. He was very diplomatic, and everything was going to go down without a fight. But then a rumor spread due to Hera, because Hera's kind of Hercules' arch nemesis in terms of she kind of was the one that kind of messed him up in the first place, and so she's kind of trying to subvert him because just the way Zeus was working things out. He was like, well, the first grandson, which was Hercules, is going to be the one that's going to inherit a whole lot of stuff, even though he was considered the bastard child of someone else that wasn't Zeus's wife, right? You could see where that would be a problem, right? So he was incredibly diplomatic in terms of getting what I want, in terms of non-aggression. But then rumors started that Hera started, and then Hera also became one of the Amazons. She metamorphosized into one of the Amazons, spread the rumor, and then they had a huge battle. Okay, so the destruction of rumors. So if somebody spreads a rumor about you, guess what? It doesn't get, you just power through it, you just destroy it. And so the people that believed the rumors got totally destroyed by Hercules. So we can take that into consideration that, well, if Hercules used the Bell of Truth and also has the arrows of truth that destroy falsehood, well, it obviously makes sense that rumors would also fall, just like the flighty birds, and just like the Hydra, which is representation of fear, right? He just powers through them, destroys them, and then gets what they want, which is closer to actualizing wisdom and truth. Um, there might be other various interpretations of that because, when you have characters involved, there tends to be a little bit deeper metaphysical meaning of what they're supposed to represent. So you can dig into that if you want to look into what the Amazons represent. That would be probably a treasure trove of stuff that you can extrapolate. The next one was a bull, right? There was a bull. It was the father of King Minos, not King Minos, sorry. It was the father of the Minotaur. So this is in relation to King Minos. Who incidentally became one of the judges of the dead in Hades' domain, which is interesting. So let's say, okay. So what that bull represents, it probably represents aggression, since the bull is incredibly aggressive in all the stories, and even after Hercules wrestles it to the ground with strength, it's funny how the boar came first. He defeated the boar with aggression and pursuit, right? And then it got tired and fell over, right? And so then he was able to take that strength and literally grapple the bull of aggression to the ground and subjugate it to his whim, right? So you use aggression to enforce boundaries, right? Hercules is always enforcing contracts. When you look at all the people that he's dealt with and the people that crossed him, he's enforcing the contracts that they made, right? And then he always wins because he has the strength, he has the endurance, he has the patience, because, doing all these trials probably took a long time. So he has patience because it's worth it. It's intrinsically worth it. So he wrestles it to the ground, and then he straps it to his back. He goes all the way across the sea and brings it back, and it scares the king. And he hides in a jar. He also hides in a jar for a lot of other creatures that he brought back, which is interesting. I don't know what the jar represents. It's a bronze jar. It was considered like a bronze wine jar. So he hid in a bronze wine jar. That has to mean something, because, that would be kind of avant-garde for a king to hide in a wine jar. Like, just think about it. Like, Queen Elizabeth hiding in a wine jar because he got scared. It's like, there has to be a reason behind that. Otherwise, that'd just be some stupid throwaway line, like a joke or something. Probably represents the cave. I'm just going to say that. It probably represents the cave. He's hiding from the truth. He's hiding from all these principles. The person that runs away from these and doesn't actually internalize these principles into themselves, they always hide in the same place, which is the jar, which is a enclosed space. And then since, I don't know, Bronze Age or whatever, that was probably the hardest material that made up all the weapons and everything else in wine jar. Usually you drink wine, you don't hide in the jar, right? Because you pull it out. So that might be it, but there might be something else there that I'm missing. What is it? There was another one where he went across the sea and he had to get these mythical cattle from a like a person, like a giant that had 3 bodies, and is just a ridiculous giant. No Greek or anybody has ever been that far, and there's a myth that he was able to use his strength to part and make the Strait of Gibraltar, which connects the Mediterranean to the Atlantic Ocean, right? That was kind of where the myth of, how the Strait of Gibraltar was formed. But, he went to go get cattle. Might just be, because cattle are used to work fields. So that might be the organization and getting a crew or a band together or a group of powerful, strong individuals to help you do things. That might be what it means. Like, you're getting outside of your comfort zone to meet people and gain not just like followers, because that's probably not it, but like people that will work with you and you'll work with them. That's what I can get from. But he fought the giant, and Hera was actually helping the giant to beat him, and it was only until Hercules attacked and injured Hera, and she like left, that he was able to defeat the giant in one shot. Right? So if the divine principle in your enemy, like divine principle, what does that mean? Well, it's just an absolute. It's just a subjective thing. Subject perceives object, right? So if I'm talking about knowledge, and that, so if the concept of knowledge is superior to just one bit of knowledge, right? So 1 plus 1 equals 2, that's one bit of knowledge, right? One bit of information, right? And then, but the thing is that that's a piece of knowledge, right? So just regardless of what happens to 1 plus 1 equals 2, right, it's still within the field of knowledge. So the absolute subjective immovable principle. Um, and so if you can attack, or at least if you have a particular person that you have to deal with or whatever, you just attack the absolute subject, aka getting a closer to truth, or attacking whatever truth that they think they have, by attacking it with the arrow, because that's what Hercules did. He shot Hera with an arrow, represents truth, and then he shot the truth into the actual person, right? Because there's two dimensions, right? There's the physical, right? Somebody's actually fighting you, or somebody's just using their mind, right? Somebody's communicating in a way or subverting you using words, right? So you attack the truth, you attack whatever they're thinking, right? The absolute principle that's in their mind, and then you can easily just, because once that's gone, they have nothing left but the body, and then you can easily just destroy that with the truth. And that's all you need, especially in today's, like back in the day, physical violence was actually like necessary a lot of the times, but today, no. You can use negotiation, debate, and they'll look like fools in front of everybody, and you'll know who's right. Right? And especially if the very social skills that just make them look like whatever. But this is dealing with people that are in your way, or a principle, because most of the time it's just us in the way, and then that's just being personified in somebody else, that we just see all these negative qualities that we actually attribute are actually just they're actually just a reflection of ourselves. So if we can see those negative qualities in others, we can know, oh, so those are the particular aspects that I need to work on next. And that's very useful, because you have absolute control of that. You can use absolute, you can be very direct and attack the problem. No, I don't want to say the problem, but redirect your awareness and your the waters of your emotions to clean it out, just like Hercules did with the stable. The next one, what am I missing? Oh, the Atlas story. So basically, Hercules was on his quest to go find the golden fruits, or the golden apples. This probably represents knowledge, because a lot of these myths just kind of do this. What we're talking about, we could talk about a very specific myth and tell you about the specific name that a specific god with this specific quality is just another representation of a much earlier god, and as all these things just blend together, and really they're just reflections of the people that were closely associated with them. So the people that the gods that were in Sparta or around Sparta had warlike tendencies, obviously, because they're just reflections of the people, right? What was I talking about? Oh yeah, going for the golden fruit. Well, it was protected by like a huge leviathan, and it was made by the Titans, right? And so Hercules wasn't going to do it himself. So on his quest though, but he met Prometheus, who basically gave the light or fire, that might represent either the will or the action or knowledge or truth, and he gave it, or the absolute like subjective idea, like the subject, the absolute core principle, and gave it to humanity. If we could get to an absolute principle or whatever, something like that. This is just what the myth is probably talking about. And I'm using a lot of Platonist kind of ideas. So if you check out like some of the Platonist philosophers, then you'll get a good understanding some of the things that we're talking about. But yeah, the fire, and then an eagle or a buzzard would come down, eat his liver, and then it'd regenerate overnight, and then it'd come back in the next day, and it's just like suffering. So Hercules just offed the vulture. He just shot it with the truth. It was dead, and the Titan was like, "Yo, thank you." So there was compassion there. He was like, he's looking, is like, that's a lot of suffering for literally doing like the best thing for humanity, which is kind of me a little bit. So he was compassionate and shot the buzzard, set him free, and then Prometheus said, "Hey, go talk to Atlas. He can help you with getting those apples because he's the father of the person of the um, Titan who made it." And so he went, and he found Atlas. He's like, "All right, hey, tell you what, I'm looking for these apples. I know that you're the father. I'll hold the world if give you a break, and then if you could get those apples for me, and then you can come back." And then he was like, "Yo, sure, bro." So Hercules took the entire world on his back, which represents responsibility, for a short time. The entire world, absolute responsibility, absolute responsibility. And then Atlas came back, and he's like, "Yo, I'll give them to your king for you." And so Hercules was like, no. So, this is just kind of like a really poor synopsis because we're getting to the core principle. We're not talking about just, details that might or might not. Of course they're important, but like, would you, factually correct about the myth, which is pretty hard because some of the translations are pretty trash, and, versus actually getting the true meaning of what the author intended, if we can ever get that. But, just thinking logically about it, like, that's how we can make things useful and not just some BS myth story that we take as a throwaway class so that we can pass and get our degree or whatever, right? Let's get something useful. So he was like, well, he's like, "Oh, thank you. I really appreciate you doing this. How about this? So I know you're doing that. I know that this, you know how heavy the world is on your shoulders. Can I put on my can you hold the world for a second while I put on my invincible lion's courage thing to help, ease the burden, because you know how hard this is." And he was like, and Atlas was like, "Yeah, sure, bro." He lifted it up. Hercules picked up the apples and he's like, thanks so much, man," and then booked it. I got him. So he was clever, right? But Hercules, for a short time, in search of the truth, put the entire world on his back, and then used his clever and his knowledge, right? Because he got the fruits, because that's what he was exchanging for, right? He got the fruits, was able to be clever, use social dynamics to get what he wants, and also hold the other to the contract that they had, that he would come back and he'd take the world on his shoulders again, right? So the use of social dynamics, so smart intelligence, and social dynamics, so charisma, as tools for pursuing the what is wise, or the knowledge, or the redemption, right? So there you go. The next one, the final one, is Cerberus, right? Where the king's like, "Yo, there's this dog in the underworld. I want you to go get it for me." It's like, whoa. Imagine you walking up to somebody that you work for. "Hey, yeah, so you're gonna have to like bring me back something from all the major volcanoes, and they all have to be diamonds. And if you don't bring them back in 90 days, you're fired." Well, then you turn in your resignation or whatever, but But it's like something so ridiculous like that. Like, literally, Cerberus represents the past, present, and future. Yeah, bring me the past, present, future. Okay, those are just measurements. So they're relationships. So it's not really a thing, but it probably represents the personal past, present, future. So what Hercules did, he went down to the underworld, and we can get into what Hades and the underworld actually represents, or at least some useful principles that aren't just BS, stories, because we can all read a great story, but if nobody knows what it means, then it's just wasting time. Okay, because we're here for information, or I'm making that assumption. I don't know if you're here for information, but so Cerberus represents past, present, future, or birth, middle age, and then death, or something like that. Well, actually, no, he doesn't represent death. He represents old age. So chronologic of the body. And that's really interesting because if you think about a dead soul, dead soul, that's an oxymoron. But like, if you think about it, why would Cerberus be in the underworld if he represented youth, middle age, and old age? Why would he be in the underworld? So basically, what Hercules did is that he conquered that. Right? He basically, the wisdom and knowledge transcended how old or young you are. Wisdom and knowledge transcends how old or young you are. And so he conquered it. He brought it back and then released it back to the underworld. Right? It's just a personal, not I want to say a personal. And Hades was cool with it. He was like, yo, if you bring it back and don't hurt it, fight it with your bare hands. Right? So there's no tools here. It's just mano a mano fight. And also Cerberus has like snakes, and snakes kind of represent wisdom. Actually, they represent wisdom, which is funny. And also they represent kind of like the soul. If you look in Egyptian iconography, they represent the soul. That's what they represent. So, it's basically like past, present, future in terms of a body, and then the soul is surrounding it. Right? That's kind of what Cerberus is. Or the soul is the animating principle behind it. So he conquers it because it's all in service to wisdom. It's all in service of discovering the absolute principle. Because Hercules eventually ascends to godhood, which is the absolute principle. That's what it means. That's not some like BS fiction story that we see in Disney Channel, right? It's like an immovable principle. It's the coherence of our minds with an absolute principle. And that's what it means, right? And so he does that, and then he wins those trials, and so he basically is free of his bondage, because he had to work for his cousin or whatever, and now he did these 12 trials. Now he's free, and now he's represents the immovable, or now then he transcended into an immovable principle, completely subject an absolute immovable principle. Yep. So this is just the progression of a hero. Everybody likes to witness themselves as hero. This is basically the original OG, hero story. And it's all in pursuit of wisdom and the absolute principle, or, resonating in the mind of becoming the absolute principle. Did Hercules actually separate the Strait of Gibraltar, or is that just a metaphor for making distinctions between things? Who knows? Which one's more useful? Probably the second one. Yeah. So I thought it was really cool that we dug in some Greek mythology and kind of did something different. So I'd love to hear your comments below on what you thought and what to do next. Maybe we'll talk about, like, I don't know, I kind of want to talk about Ares or something, or Hades, and get into like the metaphysics of what they might represent, or some ideas on where to look for it. So looking forward to it. See you guys later.